Welcome, low ego action heroes. It's Debbie Levitt, and welcome to the new Customer Experience, Customer Centricity channel, where we're going to be talking about those things. And today is Q&A and AMA, and we do have Dr. Nick joining us in just a moment. But first, the business as usual. Thanks to everybody who is supporting the channel. We don't have a join button on this channel yet as of when I'm broadcasting, but thanks to everybody who is supporting either of our two channels. Very appreciated, totally optional, and thank you for your support. Okay, so since we are going to be limiting our Q&A shows to an hour, I've got my countdown on and I forgot to set it for an hour. I set it for 22 minutes. Still learning my new channel setup. I will just make that hide and deal with that in a moment. Don't forget that you can ask your question live in the chat, or you can ask it anonymously via deltacx.com/links. I10 says, hello, I'm doing interview tagging and listening to you. Hopefully it's not going to be like drinking and driving. We hope not. Please, tag and code responsibly, and ask your doctor if this is right for you. So thank you. So I'm going to cut over to an awkward screen of me floating in a corner and Dr. Nick looking fab. And while I fix my show countdown, Dr. Nick, tell us more about you.
Hi everybody, you guys know me, but I'm Dr. Nick. I'm a 12-year UX guy, practitioner in particular, and I've been in and around digital and IT since, the 80s. So just a long-term old guy who knows stuff. Really happy to be here again.
Welcome. So we did get a couple of questions ahead of time, which everybody is welcome to do, because we do have, which way do I point now? We do have deltacx.com/links, so some people send in stuff ahead of time. Chiwat says, hey, I'm eating at the coffee shop and watching it on my phone. Cool. I'm happy that our new earlier shows are catching more people in time zones far from me. I10 says, oh my God, this should be a quote on a cup or something. Please tag and code responsibly. Hi, Dr. Nick. I know I10 still wants to share, I think, what was it, a margarita with Dr. Nick? This was something you said maybe 2 years ago. I'm going to hold you to it, I10. Okay, so we did get two questions ahead of time, and the first one looks like this. Hello, friends. Thanks for taking questions. My question is, what is a personalized user experience? One thing that comes to mind is Larry's concept of knowledge-based personas that can help achieve personalization. However, I haven't had the opportunity to design anything using this approach yet. I'd like to learn more about your approaches to designing personalized experiences. Additionally, I'm interested in how to structure information architecture to support this. So when I asked this person for more information, because I can tell who sent this in, they talked about, let me find their reply to that, just so I can give you a little bit more context, because I did ask for it. They said, for example, Monday.com can be used by different professionals trying to organize their projects. A construction manager would organize their work different than a supplier manager, an IT project manager, or a marketing manager. How do we design a system that offers a personalized experience to meet the needs of all these people?
Okay, so personalized needs for all the people. Let's start with that, because it isn't about people; it is about the individual in that case. In this case, I mean, at least when we're designing, and generally, we need to design for, as inclusive as humanly possible, given the resources at the time of doing. I think that's fair to say. When you're designing a more personalized experience, you are designing much more towards the individual instead of the kind of the. When I say the lowest common denominator, I hope you know what I mean by that. I mean by the most common, the most frequently common attributes of your users out there, something that works for everybody. Important to make the distinction between kind of personalization and customization, although I think if you ask around, you'll get lots and lots of different replies, lots of different answers. There isn't a clearly defined one, but in my mind, customization is more the aesthetic level stuff. It's like if you're going to customize your car and I'm going to put flames down the side of it and a big something on it. That's customization. Personalization is where I'm going to actually change it to something different that I want it to be, if you know what I mean. Or I'm going to make the seating very, very different for somebody maybe who wants to drive a car with a wheelchair, or other different applications. So now let's get back to your question. Oh yes, that was it. I'm interested in how to structure information architecture to support personalized experiences, and that does get super interesting, because information architectures, information architectures usually don't change. They are static, fixed things. However, the personalized experience can mean that they are going on different journeys, and the personalization part, it means you're going down different pathways, different journeys, or maybe dropping in at different points, or not seeing certain things. Maybe a good example of this would be I was designing for medical devices, and you might have a screen on a device that different levels of practitioner need to see different levels of information. So a doctor or a surgeon might need to see one level of information, but a nurse or somebody who's doing the cleaning stuff might need a very different level, or a subset of that information. Again, you can split hairs as to whether that's customization or personalization, depending upon the level of change in that experience. Personalization moving forwards from today, personalization is kind of a specialist subject of mine, but personalization is going to change massively moving forwards because of the role of AI and LLMs in our world. It's going to provide some genuine power to the personalization that currently is done in a much more unintelligent, kind of manual, yucky way. I won't go into the details on that. Basically, personalization, I think, is about to come to the fore in a massive way, but we will be designing for AI-based personalization as it's learning our, let's say, shopping habits or behaviors on site or whatever that might be. I don't want to ramble on too long, so I think I'll hand over to Deb at this point. I think that I've answered it as best as I can.
Yeah, thanks. I really like that you were also giving a kind of a differentiation between customization and personalization. And I tend to see it as customization is the user can change aspects of the system based on their preferences or workflow, layouts or feature utilization. And then personalization is more like my Amazon homepage looks different than your Amazon homepage because you're being recommended different products than I am because of Amazon's attempt at personalization and trying to capture what I might be into. So great differentiation there. For my answer to this, I think we have to kind of take a look at some of Larry's techniques. Larry talks about, hey, if you see people doing things 100 ways, that doesn't mean you build an endlessly flexible system for the user. You should design what might be just the one best practice approach that none of those 100 people thought of. But I have to say I don't completely agree with Larry. It's not that I think he has a bad idea. It's more that I see the possibility that sometimes we should say to the user, hey, this is the one best way to do this, even if you've been doing it 100 ways. We're going to design it this way, and it has limited customization or flexibility, versus a system like Monday, where there are endless ways that people could use it for different needs. And I think in that sense, when I think about different systems, that might end up being Monday's point of differentiation. Instead of saying, look, this is how we think project management goes, and this is Teamwork or Asana or Basecamp. This is how you manage your project. Follow the features, follow the paths. Monday says, make whatever the hell you want. Make your own board, make your own workflow, make your own automations. So first of all, I think you have to make the decision of whether or not you are building something that flexible and customizable, or if you want to go with some of Larry's approaches and say, look, this is the best practices approach. We're not going to give you endless ways to use this. As for the information architecture, you would still have to see what's common across the task. So across the task, how do people tend to do this? What are some common elements or steps or approaches where you know you need to build that into the system? I tend got sort of a follow-up question. What about building something that's easiest and most logical to learn for users instead of trying to personalize it for everybody universally? Yeah, and again, I think that's going to be a decision that a company makes, because Monday has created something, and again, let's just say not sponsored. Monday.com has created something that is endlessly customizable and very much your own within their system, and that's kind of their selling point. Their selling point is like, we're not going to put you into predefined paradigms. You build it. But other companies might say, man, that is so much to research and understand and build and maintain. We don't want to do that. We're going to build the best way that we think to manage projects. We're going to be Jira. We're going to be, the AHA. We're going to be these things that just do this kind of this way, and you can't really deviate very much from it. So I think that's more of a business decision, whether you're going to be the super customizable, flexible system or the more narrow system. And I think that's also a difference, in my opinion. Nick, tell me what you think, between Apple and Android. I think Apple tends to focus in on a more best practices approach and say, look, we're not going to give you 9,000 menus with all these customizable aspects. We think this is the best way to use an iPhone, put in your settings, whatever it is. And Android's a little bit more like, hey, make this your own in 9,000 dimensions.
Yeah, I think of it much like you and everybody else almost certainly will do. It's a scale. It's a scale from being super amazing customization, like personalized, do change it to whatever you want, to the other end of the scale, which is you do a thing, right? The difference is there's all kinds of support, training issues, and all kinds of other stuff as you go along that line. And if you don't go along that line, that's also a problem, because you're not giving people the flexibility or the variance to model, to shape the thing to their actual usage. So there's too much shaping and not enough shaping, and that's a Goldilocks amount. And for me, that's very much like Debbie's saying, it's a business decision, it's a product kind of a level decision. We can help inform that decision, of course, because as user researchers, we're 100% there to bring back that sort of insight to help a product manager make an informed decision.
Cool. I'm going to move on since we've been talking about that one for a while, but thank you. Hopefully the person who sent it in feels like they got a good answer. Let me make this font nice and big now that we have a new, bigger question area. This question came in through our link a few days ago, and it said, I found that with some internships I did a year ago, my design work was never being implemented on their site. Is this going to be a red flag on my resume and portfolio, because these were designs that never shipped at all? I think we've gotten this question before, but it's a good time to give a fresh answer. Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you my answer. I hope it's the same as Debbie's. I don't think it matters whatsoever, the fact that it didn't ship. Or maybe that's what's wrong with my portfolio, because there's a ton of stuff in there that went to pitch, or it didn't see the light of day, but there was a ton of work, of very good user-centric work that went into it, although the project got canned or other things have happened. That stuff just happens. You still have the experience, you still did the work, you still got the learnings. That's what you want to express in your portfolio to a potential employer or anybody, to say, hey, look, this is what I can do, this is what I have done, this is the quality of my thinking, my process, all the other stuff that we like to put into our folios. So no, I wouldn't let it worry you at all. In fact, I wouldn't even make a thing of it. You're not lying. It doesn't matter what happened with the outcome of it. I mean, it does matter. If you had a really massive outcome and it was brilliant, then great, you want to shout about that. But otherwise, I don't think you need to make a deal of it and put a corner flash on it that says, did not ship, or something like that. You don't need to do that to it. Sorry. Debs, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm in the same bucket. The only thing I want to warn people about is just to remember confidentiality. That very often when something hasn't shipped, the company tends to see it as a secret. This is something we worked on. It didn't go to the public. When something didn't go to the public, you do have to take a look at whatever confidentiality or privacy or secrecy that you have agreed to as part of your work agreement. So if something did not go public, yes, absolutely, I think you you can consider putting it in your portfolio, but you might have to be careful about what you show and how you tell the story, because the company might see that as highly confidential. I ran into that with some of my work at Macy's, where there were a number of projects I worked on that never went live, and basically I've waited like 5 years to talk about them because I wanted to make sure they were so far in the past that nobody at Macy's would be like, you're telling our secrets. It's like, dude, that secret's from 2016. So that's old news. So yes, I think these can be in your portfolio, but you might have to blur some things, you might have to redact some things, you might have to tell the story in a little bit of a vague way. And then usually at the end of the portfolio project, I know Nick said you don't have to mention it didn't ship. I usually do. So again, up to you which way you want to go. There's neither of these is right or wrong. But usually, because people are usually wondering what was the outcome, you did this thing and what happened. And usually I'll say, due to budget, chop, or priority change, this project ended before this went live to the public. And so I might end with that. I might not start with that, but usually I do mention that, because then otherwise people will be like, hey, what was the outcome of that? How did it go? And I'll have to be like, no one ever saw it. So yeah. Chiwat says, I remember that episode on Karen's portfolio and how he presented something that didn't ship, and that was good. Yeah, that was back over on the Delta CX YouTube channel. Now we've got 2 channels to juggle. So you can just look up on YouTube, go search for Delta CX portfolio, and I imagine you'll find the episode where we go through Karen's portfolio, which was quite good. I10 also said, internship. I have some projects in my current full-time role that didn't ship because priorities changed, management changed, etc. So just know this happens to all of us. It's not a reflection on you or your work. Believe it or not, that's all the questions I have right now. Were the 2 questions we got ahead of time. I think people are still adjusting not only to the new time that we're on, but the new channel that we're on. So everybody please subscribe. But if you do have a question for one or both of us, you are next in the queue. So ask away. You can ask here in the chat, or you can send it anonymously through deltacx.com/links. Okay, Shweta has a question. Let's put that up on the fake sticky note. Kind of a basic question. How do you recommend candidates address career gaps in a resume? Have you ever had one, Nick?
The straight answer to that, yeah. Because when I defended my PhD in 2009, there was like 6 to 12 months where I couldn't get work. I mean, I couldn't find work. I couldn't get an interview. I didn't have a portfolio, for all the reasons that people are asking questions today. Just so you know, watching audience, I took a massive pay cut and took a £34,000 a year job and moved my family to Bournemouth to get a UX executive job at an insurance company where I was the first UX person. And that was a whole different story. So yeah, I would be honest and I would represent the gaps. But if they're really big gaps, you probably want to nibble off the ends, if I'm brutally honest. Right? That's what everybody does, blur the lines a little bit. And let's be brutally honest, resumes and CVs are not factual records anymore. But they do have to represent what you've done to a level. So just be reasonable about it. But I don't think anybody's going to think bad of you or negatively because you've got a break or two, because people have got life that goes on. Stuff happens for a myriad of different reasons. It's nobody's business. But being able to say I had to take a sabbatical, a year out, blah, blah, career change, whatever that was, just be straight up and honest. I want to believe that moving forwards, HR folk and people are just a bit more human because, we're all human beings.
Yeah, I certainly wish they were. I still hear once in a while about an HR person or recruiter who holds an employment gap against someone, but I think in an economy like this and with the number of layoffs that have been going around, it would take a pretty insensitive person to act like, why haven't you been employed every second of every day? The some of the advice that I saw, gosh, probably 2 years ago, so you can take it or leave it. And this wasn't my advice, it was something I saw online. They said, be honest about the gaps, but try to make it look like it was a period of time in which you tried to do some professional development. Like, hey, I wasn't working for a year, but I took these courses, or I upskilled in this area, or I learned these tools, or I got these certificates, whatever it might be. So I had seen a recommendation that you be honest about it. But if you upskilled during that period of time, mention it. But obviously, as Nick said, there are people who are taking extensive time off or are between jobs for various reasons. And sometimes it's childcare or elder care or something else. And maybe they didn't upskill during that time. And that's fine too. Don't feel any pressure to have grown or changed in any particular way during that gap. I usually don't mention the gaps on my resume. I think that you can see them. I think if someone asks me about them, I just have to be ready with an explanation. If someone says, hey, it looks like the last consulting gig you had ended in July 2022, which it did, what you've been doing since then, I need to have an answer for that, whatever it is. Practice it, shine it up, have an answer. That's my suggestion. Okay, I-10 asks, do you approach research analysis and the presentation phase the same way for all generative research, or, depending on research and business goals, do you create something new every time?
Kind of both.
I feel the
that
same
A10?
way.
Kind of both. Um, so I create fresh every time. Whatever I'm doing is created from fresh, but it's within a house style, my own way of doing things. So I'm thinking about a research report. I've just written one up. I just did a round of 6 user tests. I wrote the report up. I wrote it up. If you looked at all my research reports over the past 10 years, they're probably different every time, but there's a lot of commonality in them. But they'll be the same within each engagement, right? So whenever each brand or with each gig, there's a style that I produce that is appropriate for that organization and that maybe maturity or those people. Yeah. Look, communication is the name of the game here. And so it's how you communicate and get the value, the insight into the hive mind or into the hearts and minds of the people that are paying you to do it. Yeah, that's how I do it. I don't, there are tick box items that must be in there. Do you see what I mean? That I cannot, and there's a way that I like to do it by highlighting the user need and making a deal of it and then talking around it. I imagine most people do it something similarly. That's just, again, house style, but that's one of those constants that my work, probably Debbie's, any user researcher worth their salt, is probably user need driven. And so elevating that in some way and then talking around it and having ways of presenting those user needs is how we do stuff. I've got a style, Debbie has a style, and I imagine you do too. So I think that's my answer.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I would say that while I have some standard things that I tend to do on projects, how those turn out is going to be different every time. So I might go into a project trying to do task analysis or different things, and I might have some standard templates for the way I like to deliver some of these maps or artifacts. But I wouldn't say I'm reinventing my wheel each time. So to me, when there are different business goals, So as you have in your question, if there's different business goals, maybe I'm changing my method, or maybe I'm changing who are among the participants, or maybe I'm adding a few questions to get at something the business wants to know that nobody else wanted to know. So I might change some of the content or methods, but I would say in general, I tend to do what works, and that's changed over time. When I find something new that works, I start doing that, and then I get enough feedback where people go, well, can you give me this? Like we used to not make lists of problem statements for clients, but we had enough clients say, can you get me a spreadsheet of all the problems and pain points that you found? And then we had enough people ask for that where now I just tell clients, we're going to give you a spreadsheet or a list of problems or problem statements that we found, and then people are like, oh, cool. So that evolved. I hope that makes sense, Aitan. Let us know if that doesn't answer that. Feel free to ask a follow-up. We also had a question from Chiwat, which was, how would you define constructive feedback? Must all feedback be constructive?
Well, not constructive feedback is where you're just pointing the finger or being horrible with no kind of net gain, with no value in it. So you're just like calling names or just being horrible, like without any kind of value or kind of target. So it's like me being horrible to Debbie about the way she looks today or something. I don't know, right? Instead of something. I'm sorry, Deb.
It's fine. I look
right?
terrible
Do you know what
today.
I'm saying? Instead no.
No, we can joke together.
Right. There is constructive feedback where you can say, look, you've built a thing. Personally, I don't like it, but I can see that, or customers have said, they can't find the handle. They can't find how to open it. They don't know where to check out. There's lots of like those sorts of things. That's constructive because you're giving a solution, or you're highlighting the problem. So you're saying, here's something that's wrong, and here's how you can improve it, or here's some suggestions for how you might improve it. That's constructive. It might just be my opinion, or it might be evidence driven, right? There's lots of forms that this can take, but usually constructive feedback is helping you, is giving you feedback that's meaningful, that will help you make the thing better, basically.
Yeah, when I think about constructive feedback, and it's really a great question that we've never had here before, so thank you for that. First of all, the old Mystery Science Theater joke comes to mind, which is, Joel, we think your feet smell like cheese, but we like to think of it as good cheese. I think that when I think about constructive feedback, I think about, it's not just about being a cheerleader or telling someone they're great or necessarily being positive. The constructive means if you do have something negative to say, or a growth opportunity, or something someone could have done better, that you say it in a helpful and supportive way. That instead of going, Nick, you're a total bastard, you got it wrong, you're a dick, do better next time, and then you're left going, what just happened?
What do I do with that?
Yeah.
What do I do with that?
Exactly. Yeah. It's not actionable. And so to me, constructive feedback is helpful and actionable because I can pinpoint or understand what I didn't do that well and what I can do later. And designers notoriously get a lot of fluffy, not helpful feedback. Make it better. Make it pop. Make it bluer. Make it, how many times have we heard these things in our career? And I go, and I've spent, make it clean. Remember that one? Oh my God. So I've had so often to say to people, what's your definition of clean? Can you tell me more about where you think this doesn't work for our user? And that way I'm not asking them, why don't you like it? I'm asking, how do you think this doesn't work for our user or customer? So does all feedback have to be constructive? It should be. I would rather build someone up, even if I have to tell them their baby is ugly or they're smelly or whatever, than just cut people down or gaslight them or manipulate them or put them down in some way. So I think feedback should be constructive, but not all feedback is constructive. That is the unfortunate truth. Yes, go ahead, Nick.
Let me tag something on the end. Let me tag something if I can. So some private client work a couple of weeks ago, this 6-user research thing, I sent the insight report over to only one of the partners because the other partner, who is a developer, the kind of the brains of the operation and the developer, would not have taken this as constructive feedback or as evidence or as insight, and would have thrown their toys. And in fact, it was quite a difficult. The point being is the person I sent it to said, "Well done for sending it to me first, because then I can break it to him slowly. Because I am to saying that your baby is ugly. It's never seen a user
Stakeholder
before. I've got
management.
some amazing insight. Yes, I've got amazing insight that's going to move the needle. I mean, it's gold. Any other brand would be thanking me for the work that I've done, but this guy, if he'd have seen the report, would have actually thrown the book at me and probably refused to pay my invoice. So things get messy. So what I'm saying is you've got the whole constructive feedback thing. There's very, very many levels to it. Very many levels to it. Just FYI, and that's just what I'm juggling at the moment.
Yeah, and Chiwat asked 2 follow-up questions, so I'm going to put them up one at a time. The first one was, is it rude to point out a problem without offering a suggestion or solution because you don't know any?
No, not at all. I think it's about your motivation. If you can spot a problem, which again, frankly, I do all the time, because and maybe Deb too. I've got a hair trigger for bad UX. Like I can't tolerate it. My low frustration tolerance is on the floor. So if I see a problem with a product or service, or if you do, and you're pointing it out, you're just raising the awareness of that issue in the hope that it gets addressed by somebody. There's lots of problems in this world that there isn't any awareness of it, but I don't have the solution for, because it's not my job to solve that. But to raise awareness of that to the people whose responsibility it is, it seems like a good thing to do. Now, I think if anybody thinks that's rude because, as Debbie says, I'm calling your baby ugly, or people live in a no criticism echo chamber, or that kind of stuff, tough. That's on them, unfortunately. If you're doing it with goodwill and you're doing it, what's the word? Just politely, and you're not doing it with any kind of spin or kind of sneer. Ha, you got it wrong, or oh gosh, that's crap. Just be positive, and that's constructive criticism once again.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would say that there's a lot of problems we should be talking about, even if we don't know the solution. I remember a couple of years ago, or 4 or 5 years ago, or longer, when I started complaining more publicly about boot camps and the quality of UX education, a common response on LinkedIn that people used to try to fight me on that was, oh yeah, well, what's your solution? And my thought was, I might not know the perfect solution, but we should still warn people that some of these or all of these boot camps are not good investments of time or money. Even if I don't have the solution, we can still talk about the problem. I can't solve racism, but I want to talk about racism. I think that, and I think it just depends on how you frame that conversation. So I think I agree there with Nick. Chiwat's second follow-up question before we get to the anonymous person who sent in the question. I've got it coming up. Is it possible the customer thinks that make it cleaner is a suggestion and thus constructive feedback?
Okay, let's quickly unpack what does make it cleaner mean.
Well, I just mentioned
That's
that.
a very subjective view.
He's jumping off of how I just said that as an example of some of the fluffy feedback we get.
But there are lots of memes or trends in our world, and especially agency buying stakeholders, often there are trends in that world, and people tend to do similar sorts of things. And so make it cleaner, make it pop, make it this, or make it flat for a while, or make it it's often just parlance, it's just language rather than a kind of a design, a deeply held design belief, if you know what I mean. It's often just an idea or a meme that's knocking around. More than that, I think you'd have to look at the actual example, the actual context, the actual thing, because it depends on so many different things. I'm putting down as make it pop, make it clean, as more kind of memey rather than fully thought through design directions.
Yeah, and I would agree. When customers and clients or teammates have said to me, "Make it cleaner," I will immediately say, "Cleaner means different things to different people. Can you tell me what you mean by that?" And very often the next thing they said was, and everyone will take a drink to this one, more white space.
Like Apple. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
or
I think I said
Nick's
make
good
it like
too.
Apple.
Yeah, that's good too. More like Apple. Yeah, so either more like Apple or more white space. And I would always say, okay, but what problem are we solving here? Where do you? And that's why I always phrased it as, where do you believe this design will make our user disconnect? And I try to get them focused back on the user and not and get them away from focusing on this fake more white space and make it look like Apple kind of thing. Oh, Chihuat says maybe they want to say copy this style but don't want to be too open about it. Well, if they're allowed to say that if they want. They can say, "Hey, yeah, I really wish this looked more like Apple stuff." But then I can say, "Why? You're not Apple." I've had clients say to me, "Oh, our website should be more like Amazon." And I'd be like, "You're a B2B seller of network security products. What aspect of Amazon do you want to be like?" And then they were like, and while they're eyeing, I jump in and I say, "Well, you just want Amazon's success, right?" And they go, "Oh yeah, we want Amazon's success." And I go, "Okay, but they might have that success despite their page layouts or despite their search results. Like, don't
Yeah,
rush to try to
exactly.
copy Amazon's website. It might not be as great as you think." All right, let's get
No, but
to.
I
Oh,
think
go
that's
ahead.
a really big point, though, Debbie. That's a really big point, though, because I think it's particularly acute in our world of digital. But the trendiness, this kind of herdy, meme-based copying everybody, it's so endemic in our world. I don't know if it's true in the wider world, but anything anybody says gets copied. Competitors copy each other as a race to the bottom. It's all trying to de-risk, but also introducing the most ridiculous levels of risk. And it's this kind of homogenization, this standardization of just average. You know what I'm saying? It's just copying. So I would say for most people, okay, great example, Spotify's model for Squad, which got copied and taught by every management consultancy over the past 5 years, except Spotify themselves have been saying it didn't work for us, don't do this. Right? And people are paying millions and millions of pounds to be taught it by people. So honestly, I think most of the wins to be made for yourselves as growing professionals and for the brands that you work for is think for yourself, do the work, get the evidence, make the decisions. Copying other people, if anything, is just a hypothesis. It's not the end game.
Yeah, and you would still want to, if my client insists, I say, "Well, why don't we bring both of these to usability testing? I'll mock up something that looks like what you're saying. We'll bring these to usability testing and we'll see what works better for the users." And usually they agree to that. Okay, we got a really interesting question in anonymously, and this one says, "As a UX person and a woman working in a company full of white men, I don't get invited to important meetings, etc. I can't seem to prove my credibility. Is there any way to improve it, or is it time to look for a new job?" Ooh, I have a lot to say about this. Nick, you
Yeah,
first.
yeah. I'll be brief because I'm an old white man, so there's that, right? I think and I've been talking with somebody at lunch today about sexism and prejudice and all kinds of bad stuff that is still really incredibly rife in the world. And I think I'm just naive because obviously I don't see the world that way, but there's lots of people who do, and I find that really alarming. Cutting straight to the chase, yes, it is time to look for a new job. Without going into any of the details or thinking through it, I can't believe we're in 2023 and you feel this way. I don't even need to go into the details of it. The fact is that you're being excluded on the basis of your gender, or let's face it, even if it isn't that, if it's the basis of your role, that's still not good for UX or for maturity or for your career. So just smile, interview like mad, GTFO, time to leave.
Totally agree. So I would say it is certainly time to look for a new job. Me being a whistleblower change agent personality, I would just be asking myself the question, can this be improved? And now you can still be applying for jobs and interviewing while you wonder if this can be improved. And then I also wonder where you're located, because if it really is gender-based discrimination, this is probably illegal in many countries. Americans love to sue, and you absolutely can sue on these grounds if you believe it's something that you can prove. So again, start taking some screenshots and moving them over to your personal computer about how everyone's invited to a meeting except for you. And pull together whatever evidence you can. Even if you never sue, pull that evidence together while you still work there and while you can get to it. Remember, the day that you quit or they fire you, you don't have access to that evidence anymore. So you want to make sure you get that. Aitan says it could be gender and race and role. Very sad. Yeah, exactly. We don't know. We only know you are being excluded. We don't know why, but either way, it's probably discrimination, especially if rooms are full of men or white men and magically you're on the team, but you're the only one not invited. Yeah, Nick, I have more to say, but go ahead, jump in.
Just very briefly, I had the same thing. I considered it bullying. I cannot say where it happened. I will say it happened in government, where me or my role or my neurodiversity was excluded from meetings by the rest of the team, and the delivery lead saw this and did nothing about it. I felt shockingly bad about it. It made me feel terrible about myself. I see that as a form of bullying. Obviously, it's a form of prejudice too, but just person to person, nobody should be treating people that way in a professional environment. Sorry, Dan, go back to you.
No, for sure. And thank you for sharing that. That's why my question would be, as Shweta's saying, can you escalate this to your manager? Again, you may or may not feel like you can talk about this to your manager or to HR, but hypothetically, your manager is supposed to know about this and hear you and support you. Maybe you've mentioned it to them and it didn't help. A lot of people don't like to go to HR because they don't believe HR is going to help or support them. But you might want to go to HR with it, and especially if you say something like, "I'm concerned it's gender discrimination." An American company will immediately trip over themselves, and you'll probably be invited to all the meetings starting the next day, because the American company knows you're waving a little flag that says, "I could sue you." So I would say don't mention that you could sue them. Don't say that. They probably know, especially if it's an American company. And I'm not saying you have to sue anybody, but this, in some countries, this is suable stuff, especially if you feel you can prove it. So, yeah, that would be my suggestion.
Can I ask?
And by the way, let's just also quickly remind this person that it's not about you proving your credibility, because I see that there in the question. Don't make this about you didn't get this right or you didn't try hard enough. You shouldn't have to prove your credibility. You got the job. Remind your manager, remind HR, I got the job. I work here. I'm on the team. I should be in the meetings. That's it. You don't have to prove your credibility. You got the job. Nick.
Absolutely. Make sure that it isn't. I'm not saying this is the case. What I'm saying is this can be the case, especially if it's full of white men. And I'm not saying if it tends to be heavily engineering or heavily developer-driven culture, it may not have anything to do with gender, although I'm not for a minute belittling or saying it is that. Often it can be a need to move forward without those pesky user-centric people holding me back. In which case, there's a relationship to be built there.
We got to follow up
misogyny.
the person who asked the question. They said, "Thank you for answering my question. I talked about it with my manager a few times. He seemed to understand, but I struggle to understand and see the line between complaining and trying to fix something. I don't want to look like somebody who is complaining all the time." So this sounds like you've been gaslit, whether other people are gaslighting you or you're convincing yourself, "Oh, I'm a complainer." When I worked with a South African company, I found that nobody in the company wanted to talk about any of the ugly stuff that was going on because nobody wanted to look like a complainer. So this is sometimes cultural. And I just want to make sure you know, first of all, you're not a complainer. A complainer is like, "Oh, broken nail." Like, a complainer is someone who is complaining about something, and you have a real problem here. Yes, you are complaining, but you have a real problem here. And so I would say, if your manager seemed to understand, that's not enough. You need action. A manager is supposed to take action, especially when there's discrimination. So this is not something that we need to understand or not understand. Whatever type of discrimination this is, you need to be involved in the team meetings. So I would be going back to the manager and I would be saying, "Hey, it's still going on. I'm a part of this team, yet I'm the only person not being invited to the meetings. We need to take action. Can you please make sure I'm included on all of the important emails, invited to all of the important meetings, that my name is on the project," whatever it is, because people who are discriminating are going to look to erase you in all kinds of creative ways.
So when I was at that insurance company, after 6 months, I was clearly very unhappy. And I was trying to stick around for 12 months for the sake of my CV, for my resume. I was complaining a lot on Facebook, and I think one of my friends said, "Nick, quit complaining, just quit." And I hung on and I hung on and I hung on. The point being here is that if you are complaining that much, either to yourself, to your friends and family, to your partner, or, whatever, or internally to the business and team and leader, that's, I think, is a massive red flag. It's not once, it's not twice, there are things that you're not happy about that you've raised repeatedly. And if it's just you raising these things, then maybe it isn't the right place for you. It just isn't. And maybe you can fly higher and faster somewhere else. I just, sometimes these things don't work out, or we don't fit in, and that's why we tend to move on. So don't want you to feel like you're a complainer just because. It's about your self-respect and your self-value, and you've got some basic standards that you want to keep to, and that you shouldn't feel bad about that. I know I'm guilty of this too. I think we all are to an extent, but what I'm trying to tell you, as somebody who's longer in the tooth, is that complaining isn't necessarily complaining, it's raising of issues. And if they're not met, or they're not dealt with, they become sounding like complaints. And if people are just ignoring you, like I said, maybe it's not the right environment. Maybe there's a better opportunity and a kind of better synergy out there.
And I'm just noticing that it looks like my system never put us live on LinkedIn. So I apologize to anybody who's watching this later who says, "Why didn't I know that this Q&A happened?" It looks like my system never went live on LinkedIn, so we just have our YouTube people joining us today and a Twitch person, so thank you for that. Please remember to press like on the video, and after the stream ends, leave a comment, because it really tells the YouTube algorithm that you dug the show. And again, leaving the comment after the stream ends helps us more than a comment during the stream. YouTube doesn't count those. So comments and likes, please. We need to help out the new channel. Okay, we've got 2 more questions, and then I think we'll be wrapping up for today. The first one says, what is a mental model? How to uncover them during the research? Do you observe them and follow up with questions?
Okay, that's a good question. It's not an easy question to answer quickly.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's an entire, I think it's like a chapter or 2 in the book I'm working on with Larry that we think will be out in August. So I might have to say, wait for the book.
Yeah, a mental model is a way, I'll say, of kind of conceptualizing something inside, right? It's a representation in your mind. Now, I'm going to give you some examples of mental models. Okay, self-checkout machines at the supermarket, right? No, that's not a really great idea. A mental model of driving might be driving on the left versus driving on the right, US, UK. That's a pretty shockingly bad example. Deb, give me an example of a good mental model.
I'm not great with mental models. I had to ask Larry to further define them in the book because I have trouble explaining them to people. I should open up the book Larry and I are working on and just read from that, but it's not public yet, so it's confidential.
No, I can answer this. I can answer this. I just need to come up with an example. So how do you, the reason why you said it is because how do you uncover them during research? Well, a mental model, for all intents and purposes, is a way of doing a thing. Okay, that's an easy, simple way of doing it. It might be that people have a mental model of parking their car in the car park and going up to a kiosk to pay and then walking away. But the modern world has now got apps and stuff. So you might have your mental model, your old mental model is, I go out, park my car, I go to the machine and I pay and I put the little docket, the little ticket thing in my window, in my windscreen. At least that's how we do it here in the UK, right? That's the parking warden can see that you've paid your money. But when you're doing it through app, it's all centralized and it's better. You don't have to pay for a warden. So most people want to have this app controlled thing. But that's a different mental model. It requires me going and parking my car, downloading the app, or then finding the location number, putting that in, and then paying for it through the app. That's a different way of paying for my parking. It's a different mental model, right? The mental model is not the procedure, it's the conceptualization of I need to go to a machine versus I need to go to an app, right? So there's lots of work done. And this is why behavioral design is the cool thing, because of ways of designing people to change their behavior, to make them aware, and then to change to the new thing, which is better for them and better for the person, for the council or whoever's running that car park. So how do you will uncover them during research, almost inadvertently, because now that you know what a mental model is, you'll be able to see them coming out in your research. But it's especially true of discoveries. It's particularly true of discoveries when you're trying to learn how do people do a thing, how do people check into a hotel, how do people buy their groceries online on an app, how do people do. You're establishing a mental model, a way of doing stuff. You might want to be then converting people or changing into a new way of doing things, but that's a different thing. So that's basically it. That's how you observe them, by being cognizant of them, and you can specifically script and do stuff to be able to expose that stuff. What is their mental model? How do you conceive of doing it, this thing? Yeah, I think that's not a bad answer for a tough question.
Well done. And I'm going to defer and just say, read Larry's book when it comes out. He does a better job explaining it than I can, but Nick did a great job. So thank you there. We have two more questions. Chiwat wants to know, is there a difference between tribalism and company culture? Probably depends on the company.
Tribalism isn't something I'm really that aware of. I mean, if we're talking in terms of like pockets of cults of like Civil War type, silo-y kind of warring factions type stuff, I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. I'm going to put my hand. I don't know. I think in some company cultures, it's possibly more tribal and more siloed, and there's a more stronger of a brand or culture in that particular silo or work unit or business unit, whatever that is. There may even be competition or even rivalry between these things. There might be antagonism, proper civil war, internally. But it also might be really positive, and it might be kind of a friendly competition to see who can be more innovative or who can ship faster, all that kind of stuff. I guess I took that with a negative spin to begin with, but tribalism, I suppose, could be fairly positive if everybody's, happy and doing the right thing, and that these tribes aren't clashing and all that kind of stuff. I think culture is super important. I mean, I don't know if it's been underplayed, but moving forwards, company culture is paramount. And in this post-pandemic hybrid world, it's becoming even more paramount, and people are just we're finding that way as we speak. So yeah, Simple answer is I have got no idea.
Yeah, and then what can we do about it anyway? So I'm going to put up our last question, which was from Shweta, who says, what do you think about the meme about Prince Charles and Ozzy Osbourne about personas? It's trending. It seems a joke. People are taking it seriously. Are you familiar with that meme where it says, like, hold on, someone just sent it to me
Yeah, like
while I'm doing this show.
yeah, I've seen it, and
So
it's
they're both
basically
male,
like
they're
both are
both born
princes,
in
both of this, but
1948,
yeah,
they're both raised in the UK, married twice, lives in a castle, wealthy and famous. And then it says
yeah.
personas shouldn't be about demographics, personas should be about the problems and challenges people face.
Well, that's spot on. I mean, it should be about their needs and the context that they live in. If it's gonna be a top trump card of comparisons, then yes. But that's just rubbish persona. That's not persona usage. That's you're playing top trumps, and in that which case, Prince Charles and Ozzy Osbourne can, under certain circumstances, data perspectives look the same. Are you going to design for Ozzy and Prince Charles or King Charles the same? No, you are not. But they may have similar needs in the metal department. I don't know. I don't know what the King's musical taste is like. I would love it if he listened to metal. That would be amazing. That's a whole different story. Uh, yeah, that if that's what it's saying, then I'm very supportive of that, because what personas need to be are data repositories of behavior,
Yes.
of needs, effectively. And when they are data repositories of needs, everything good happens. When they are banks of fairy tales and constructed stuff, then they are dangerous, risk-ridden nightmares that produce bad things consistently. So no, then I'm supportive of that kind of a meme if that's the message it's putting out.
Yeah, and in general, I thought the meme or whatever it is was okay, because it shows that while these two people are demographically similar, they may or may not have anything else in common. They may not have the same needs in common, and that building personas or marketing personas just purely based on demographics like age or income or gender or skin color are probably a bit old-fashioned and outdated. And as just to support what Nick said, they have to be more about behaviors and tasks. Chiwat says the parallel feels like episode from Ancient Aliens. It's some sort of fallacy.
But you know what? I mean,
Yep.
in a parallel universe far, far away, King Charles and Ozzy Osbourne are probably sitting in like the same parents' meeting or the same support group or something where they overlap, right? Where their two very different worlds overlap because they share a love for Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, or I don't know what that thing is, right? In which case you are designing to the same person. But okay, it's just how you.
But not because
characterize it.
they were
It's just
born
data.
in the same year.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be because they have a user need or a pain point that is common to the pair of them.
All right. Well, with that, we've wrapped up our show nicely in an hour. So, Nick, where can people find you, follow you, buy something from you, join your secret club, learn the handshake? Tell us all the things.
Okay, well, I have no things currently. The Cult of Curiosity is currently going through a rebranding phase, which means I just need to get around to giving a new name.
Yay.
You can find me on LinkedIn, although I am going to be leaving the country on Thursday. I'm going on annual leave with my family for a couple of weeks, so I'm looking forward to that. So you won't.
I wish you were coming to my country.
A welcome break, yes. So I've got nothing to sell you, and I don't want to sell you anything. Just wishing you all best wishes, and I hope you have a really great week and a really great month. And I will catch you back here same time next month for more Office Hours with Debbie.
All right. I-10 says, thank you both. I'm going to put my head in ice cold water. I'm tired of tagging and coding, but this was a blast. And Chiwat has, I don't know what that emoji is, some sort of exploding person. Shweta says, enjoy your holiday. Malika says, thank you. Nick, thank you for joining for the Office Hours Q&A AMA adventure. We know we'll see you every month on the second Tuesday. So we'll say to be continued. And for now, I'm just going to do the boring, quiet ending of the show because I haven't built in a song yet. So thanks, everybody, and see you soon. Bye.